Well, today we're going to talk about security and also LowSec, not necessarily together. When we mean security, we are discussing how to protect your account from getting nabbed and having all your stuff taken and stolen. So we'll talk to NoizyGamer about that in a few minutes. And we're also going to be talking about LowSec with Nosy and JoeBane from his stream channel. We'll meet him in just a few minutes. First, I want to say hello to our panel. How's it going, Carneros?
Good morning, everyone. Great to be here with you.
And Ashterothi with us today.
Greetings, fellow Empyreans.
First, I'd like to introduce NoizyGamer. He's off screen. How's it going, Noisy?
Oh, doing pretty good so far.
Great. And here is JoeBane with us today, too. How you doing, Joe?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. All right. So I introduced you all so you could all participate as needed. But the first thing we want to tackle before we actually get to security is local chat, right? How'd that go?
In general, the server was a lot more stable this week. It behaved better last weekend. You'll remember we were freaking out with hours of not being able to start a fleet with fleet chat, not being able to see in local, not be able to participate in all of our chat channels. It was crazy. But this week, they came into work, they fixed it up. It's been working better, and that's a big deal because it might mean that they have to roll back. If they can't get it working, they may have to roll back what they do for the next planned set of content expansions, and the highlight of which is probably the 64-bit Eve client. But we'll get to that later.
I actually I tweeted to Falcon, I believe it was, and he said that the chat client will not delay the 64-bit client.
Sweet. But I don't know how they do it, but good.
So even if they rolled it back, they probably would not add back in eVoice, and eVoice was the thing that was the problem.
Oh.
Okay, I thought the whole thing was non-64-bit compatible.
But weren't they discussing that if local chat kept breaking, that they might actually revert back to the old way of typing and texting and chatting in the game?
Yeah.
Apparently that module wouldn't break the 64-bit client, though.
Well, they weren't.
But separate from that,
sure, but that's what they said. Because I specifically asked them, because that was the first thing I thought of too. I was like, oh my gosh, if we're rolling back the chat client, that means that we're going to delay the 64-bit client. But they said that they're pretty sure that won't be true. But at the same time, something like this kind of rollback is just totally unprecedented and unpredictable. So who knows what would happen if they actually tried to do it.
Well, I mean, as a separate issue from the 64-bit client that they were just looking at as a failed transition, and they might go back. They were going to make a decision, I believe, in February. And so we don't know if this has affected that or not.
Right. There was a dev blog that was put out, I think, a week ago, and they said that they are acknowledging that this is an issue. They are refocusing a ton of their effort into fixing it, and if they can't fix it, they'll roll it back. But rolling it back is not, by any stretch of an imagination, an easy task.
Yeah, it's probably just as hard. It's one of those situations where you're going to have trouble one way, have trouble the other.
Yeah, when you do a conversion like this, you don't necessarily think about the idea of putting it back.
Oh, I think you're being targeted.
That's my phone.
Don't you wet your pants every time somebody calls you when that happens?
No, that's the sound of me targeting somebody else.
Oh, you're right. Okay. Well, what's funny is I used to equate that down with being targeted, because if you have auto retarget on, when you get targeted, you automatically target whatever's targeting you. And so that was a signal that, something's got me locked. That is usually turned off by more advanced players, because when you're in a battle, you're going to constantly hear that. So you turn all that off. But if you're kind of a solo player and a casual player, you leave that on. So you know when something's got you. Okay,
although
so
I did know a Twitch streamer that had the hull alarm as their follow sound. So while you watch them, every once in a while, it would just randomly play the hull alarm and freak everyone out.
Doesn't that?
That's awesome.
That would totally shock people like watching. Joe, let me ask you a question before we get going. When you're an experienced PvPer as you are, and you do a lot of solo and low sec stuff, do all the sounds eventually do you ignore? Does your body have a reaction when you hear those sounds?
That's a great question, and I leave a lot of the alert sounds on, even though I've modified where they alert me at, because the auditory indicators for what's going on are just as important as the visual indicators.
Yeah.
At least for me.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that. You can actually, on the HUD, there's the hamburger menu. You can actually alter when the different alarms go off. And one of the things that some people suggest is that if you turn your shield alarm to like 90%, then it suddenly becomes an alarm of I'm taking damage as opposed to I'm about to lose my shields.
Right. Oh, so you put it at the beginning, not the end of the
Yeah, some people recommend that.
That's what I do. I just shield alarm at 85%, on armor alarm. I think it's at 20, and then I want to know if my hull gets hit, so it's at 80.
Oh, so those are both high. So when you're going into a hull, you want to know right away. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to know it's kind of the auditory indicator to make sure you've started your repper.
I guess it's no help if you're like, it's just screaming at you, you're about to die. Like, yeah, I already know that. So why is this alarm set so low?
Well, some of us fly Galente, so 30% hull means we still have a few thousand hit points.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll get to more of that low sec tips and tricks in a few minutes. Let's actually go now to the security issue, and we know that CCP sent out another dev blog. Carneros, what was generally in there?
Okay, every now and then it's almost like they want to remind us that they're doing stuff in that team. And the security team looks at cheaters. They look at real money trading, RMT. They look at people who are trying to buy and sell ISK from outside of the game economy and the correct channels. They're looking for people who are trying to run automated bots to do repetitive game tasks so they can just sit back and earn money and loyalty points and stuff. So they're running around doing that, but they also talk about what you can do to help and what you can do to keep yourself secure. These things are all connected to each other. The RMT trade at one point in the history of MMORPGs was probably mostly about people farming lucrative stuff and then selling their extra currency. And then those people then collecting extra currency and selling it to other people. And then it came to be, maybe these bots can help us farm more efficiently 24 hours a day. But now bots is probably a smaller source of the funds being used to fund it, and more of it's coming from hacking into your account and stealing all your stuff and selling it to someone else. Noisy, would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, it's pretty much. The only thing I differ on you is that early on, gold farmers would use actual people and actual farms of people in China and low wage places like that. And then they had to go to automation because as games got older, the prices of in-game currency would go down. So you had to do things like input automation with like IS Boxer, or you'd have to actually run bots because that was less labor intensive. So that's how the bots really got going and how it got to be incentivized for RMT.
Yeah, this was a big problem in a lot of other MMOs, like including World of Warcraft. I remember before two-factor auth was brought to EVE, I was often saying that the more you act against bots and RMTers, the more risky, the more threat there is for hackers. Because if hacking accounts becomes easier than botting accounts, then that's just what they're going to do. It's a business to them. They're going to go for the easiest solution.
Oh, that's interesting. It's
There
kind
is
of
an
like
irony too. If your MMO is getting targeted by this kind of activity, in some ways that's a badge of success. That means enough people are playing and people care enough about your game that they want to take these steps to try to get ahead in it. So there are worse problems you could have. A worse one would be no one cares and no one comes to your game.
That reminds me of, I heard a statistic when there is a lot of police activity around pot and disorganized, is this it? Yeah, disorganized kind of drugs, that the drugs that require labs like heroin and cocaine and those things become a lot more popular. And they become a lot more violent because people are controlling that income source. But when people crack down on like heroin and cocaine, the organized kind of drug making, then pot kind of flourishes. Like it's weird. The police pressure on one or the other kind of dictates what's going to be more pervasive. And there's your drug lesson, kids.
Welcome to Los Angeles, you guys.
Yes. But this reminds me of botting and account stealing. Account stealing would be probably a lot more damaging and scary, and CCP definitely has marked that as a priority. And a lot of people are complaining, hey, the bots are going crazy over here. Like all these kids are smoking weed on my corner. Hey, that's okay. They're not processing cocaine over here.
Well, I wouldn't call it okay. Let's say that both cocaine and weed in this context are not.
Let's legalize botting.
Yeah. Oh God.
Well, that's part of why Plex is such a good thing, because instead of people wanting to go to the black market where you can buy ISK that will blow up your account, you can go to JITA. You could go to CCP and buy Plex and go to JITA and sell it for ISK, and that way your account's safe.
All right, let's look at the dev blog for a second. I lost my notes. Hang on. One of the things the things that they specifically talked about going after were botting, and some of that had to do with faction warfare. Some of it was courier missions, and some of it was market botters. Now, in recent weeks, we've talked a little bit about the courier missions, and we've watched NoizyGamer keeping an eye on them and posting about it. We've seen him posting on Twitter. But what's been going on with the market botters? I haven't heard much about that. Do you follow any of that, Noisy?
The botters don't talk about it anymore because it's gotten to be old hat. Back about June-ish, July-ish, there was some tears going on because CCP started to ban their accounts when they got there. I don't know if they stopped banning them for some reason, but according to, I forget if it was the December or the January update, they said they started banning them again. And when I say ban, I mean delete their accounts, because with market bots, if you just ban the account, their contracts and everything are still up on the market. So they delete the accounts, and that way it clears everything out.
Can you describe what either Carneros or Noisy describe what we're talking about with market bots?
Sure. Basically, what happens is, the 0.01 ISKers out there. Basically, the bots will go through every so often, and they will reset the prices to be the lowest, and then hope to get the sales that way. And depending on how frequently it's done, it can really be bad for real people trying to trade on the markets. It's not going to affect an Aerith. Anybody that's at that scale, the market bots, it's not good. If you have people like Elizabeth Norn or Rivra, they actually identify the market bots and take them for all they're worth. But if you're not like at a really good or elite level, and you're just like an average Joe, they can really screw up your game.
Well, most people are average Joes that use the market, but these botters basically are macroed or robotic bidders that will always increase 0.1 cent over you or under you in order to capture a bid or to buy something. And so you're working against a machine that will never go to sleep. So even if you're trying to, like, you know, snipe a bid or something, it won't work against these bots because they're going to capture the item before you can. And you're not going to stay awake 24 hours trying to babysit some kind of a bid and that sort of stuff. But that's not really how, if you're doing that, that's probably not the best way to do market buying selling anyway.
More effect than that, though. It also just puts a lot more load on the JITA node blade. It makes the server have to work a lot harder. And we already know that if you go into JITA and open up the market, it's not immediately fast to get to all the stuff that you want to see in there.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that people don't realize about bots is that there's a lot of really badly written bots out there, and they go ahead and they put an increased load on the servers. And because they do, and it's not just the market bots, and because they do that, then that can, you know, lead to tie-dye and things like that and reduce performance on the servers. The servers have gotten a lot better. We've got a lot better hardware, but it's still a problem.
One of the things that I find interesting is I see this as one of those examples of art imitates life, which happens a lot in EVE. But in this case, so I remember a few weeks back, there was a lot of instability in just the real life stock market. And one of the accusations was that the reason why the stock market is so volatile is because a lot of stock market trading has been taken over by automatic machines. So what happens is that when a swing starts, all of those bots detect that swing, and so they all pile in on it, which creates even greater swings than normal. I wonder if that would have the same sort of effect in EVE, or if there isn't enough bots like watching any given product.
I don't think the market bots in EVE are that sophisticated. The actual botters have to know the market and stuff, and I don't think there's that many market botters that are that sophisticated.
Okay, well, in that case, what does it do? Like, what would a bot look for, and what would it do when it finds it?
Well, what the bot would do is the bot would be programmed to look at specific items, and if they're trying to sell the items, then it will try to, like, 0.01 ISK lower than the lowest sell price. And if they're trying to buy items, then they will 0.01 bid the highest buy price in order to buy them.
So what you're saying is that, like, if I'm on the market and I'm trying to sell something, and, like, because you can only adjust it every 5 minutes. So every time I adjust it, like, another person instantly adjusts it right afterwards. I'm probably fighting up against a bot.
Not necessarily. Some of the pros out there, they'll have multiple accounts trying to buy the same item. And so, like, if you got like a profession, if you got like, let's call it almost professional because they're not getting real money, they will have 4 or 5 characters trying to buy that same item. And so then therefore they can always, with one of their characters, 0.01 ISK.
I'd also like to bring up the fact that if you see these bots, you can report them. I'm not sure what the best way is to screen capture and who you think the botter is and stuff. Like, you can, if you see 14 VNIs all moving together doing something, you can screenshot that and bring it across. But I just want to remind people that the reporting functionality is being requested in this dev blog. They're saying if you see stuff, report it to them.
There's actually a function in the game on the character sheet. When you view a character sheet, you can click the little 3 tabs at the top left and report bot, and then they review those.
The little hamburger menu there at the top left.
Yeah, that's it. Hamburger. That's right.
Yeah.
I have
I just learned that.
I have walked over to the guys at CCP that process those, and I have watched over their shoulders while they worked. And it's crazy that people do stuff with that. In my mind, I don't know if they've moved desks since I was last there, because it's going to be, say, 7 years ago. But they've got some very sophisticated guys who know this game inside out and know the player behavior and have been around since the beginning. And they dig into each thing, and they may not tell you they did anything with your report, but they did. They dug in.
So they take all this seriously.
Yeah. A few times I would be working at CCP and playing Eve, and someone would say, "Oh, this person got banned unfairly." And I'd say, "Oh, who was that?" And I'd write it all down on a piece of paper. And I'd walk over to the senior GMs and say, "Hey, guys, can you look this one up for me?" And they'd be, "Sure." And they'd pull it up and they explain, "Here's what this person did, and here's how we know it," and all that. And, every time I went over there, every single time, the GM was right, and the guys should have been banned. And the word on the street that had come to me was not correct. It was so funny. And I was always so sure on the next one. No.
Well, speaking of botting, though, so that's how you can report them, right? You pick up the character sheet, and there's the hamburger menu, and you select report. There's a couple other ways. I think there's one even in the command line, but I'm not certain about that. But that's how you report them. How do you detect them or find them so that everybody's not reporting everybody else? And I don't know the answer to that.
I can give it the perspective from doing what I do.
Sure.
So the factional warfare bots, they're out there. They're pretty easy to identify. Excuse me. They change ships regularly. So they were in Incursuses, now they're in Atrons. The ship name is usually named Worm. Most of them will warp away before you land on grid with them. The ones that don't, when you kill them, they'll be meta-fit with that sub-Tech 1 fitting, and then they'll have a ton of ammo, anywhere between 5,000 and 20,000, and they all look the same. So they're very, very easy to spot. Typically, when you look to see how long they've been in factional warfare, it'll be between 1 and 20 days. So they just haven't been got yet. And I think in my 3-hour session this morning, we reported something like 20 bots.
Out of curiosity, which faction has the most
That was just
bots?
for breakfast.
All of them, because they win by going against each other. So they can go out and offensively plex systems against each other, and that creates more of this Play-Doh cash that people are buying, right?
Man, you eat bots for breakfast.
We try.
Well, and actually, speaking of a bot massacre, when local went down, apparently the instances of VNIs, which are Vexor Navy issues, which are particular ships that are good for AFK, away from keyboard botting, generating of income, are also used by botters. And that number went up by like 4 or 5 times, right? The normal rate of those things dying.
What I had heard was that 3-hour window of time was the most VNIs dying in a 3-hour window of time in the history of EVE.
That's kind of funny.
It sounds crazy, but it makes us smile. It's very funny.
That being said, having done VNI ratting before, I want to point out that not every VNI that died was a bot, because and I've said this before, one of the problems with fighting a bot is that anything that you would do against a bot would actually impact a player more, right? So if there is no local, that also means that players aren't going to know that you're there, and therefore you're going to get a drop on them. So not all of them are bots, but probably a lot of them.
So go ahead.
Yeah, the thing about the no local is if you are an actual player no local means that the hunter doesn't know you're there, and it's a wonderful thing. I wish I unfortunately I missed the local being down. I really regret missing that.
Yeah, you could have stealthily ran around and done what you needed to do.
Oh yeah.
So the market bots, we can see them working, and we can see some of the. We just got a tip on how to detect other bots that are in, I guess, low sec and high sec and null sec. But Ash, you wanted to talk about courier contract bots. I've never heard of this.
I was actually going to ask because, yeah, like all of those other ones make total sense to me now, and I also get courier contracts. But I guess what would be the purpose? Like, if I wanted to get a bot, why would I choose to make a courier contract bot as opposed to like a VNI bot or a faction warfare bot?
Do you think it's a typo and it's supposed to be courier mission bots, not courier contract bots?
Yeah, it's courier missions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
So that just means they're running really mundane missions automatically without you interfering with it. And so you get the money from, from the rewards of doing the mission.
Right, because a combat mission, each mission kind of has their own little considerations, but a courier mission is just like, here's your destination, take this. And so, yeah, I get that.
Yeah, it's probably a lot easier to do a bot for that, to program a bot for that. And isn't it funny, like, we get rewards for all kinds of different behavior in this game. Wouldn't it be interesting if CCP basically said, hey, program a bot, as part of a mission in the game? Like, here, set up some code to automate this process, whatever it is, and somehow they put a gamey face on it so that you're actually in character building some kind of mechanism that generates a result, and then you get paid for that.
Yeah.
Let's not gamify the construction of bots.
I think it's pretty funny.
On the anti-RMT stuff, they were talking about not just buying and selling ISK, but also assets, which I assume normally means ships, expensive ships, and then characters. So they're seeing people doing all of the above and are trying to ban on both sides buying and selling. So I just want to remind you that. Noisy, have you seen stuff about that in your work?
Oh yeah, about the RMT, definitely. Basically, it's kind of how I detect whether there's a bot ban wave going on, or if there's an RMT ban wave going on. Is I look at the market, and if the prices are rising, that means there's a shortage of ISK, which means that CCP is doing things, and also sometimes. Not so often anymore. You can get tiers off of botting forums, but basically it's the hardcores left, so you don't see very many tiers.
And tiers, you mean people crying about getting banned, right?
Yeah, like having 30 market bots, market betting accounts actually being deleted. That kind of thing.
You mean botters have feelings?
Botters have feelings. They used to have a lot more feelings because it wasn't. I mean, at least the places I watch, it's more the professional ones that've been around for a while. They've had hundreds of accounts banned, so they're used to it.
From my experience, the prevailing feeling of a botter is just self worth, like, gosh, I can't remember the word. They're full of themselves and they think that they are above the system.
Kush Hayes in chat brings up this. He says, I just came back to EVE after a long break. I see botting is still an issue. Historically, what's the pattern of botting like compared to now?
I think there's less bots personally. Back in 2009, right before I started playing, CCP conducted something called Unholy Rage. And when they did that, the average concurrent users went down between 20 and 25%. So basically 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 players online at any one time was actually a bot.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was worse back then. What you deal with today is a fraction of what they had.
So that's an interesting point, because the extension of that is people used to look at the population playing the game at the same time. The PCU, I think it's called, player concurrent utilization. I don't know.
Peak concurrency.
Peak concurrency, right. That's how many players are playing the game right now. How alive is this world that I'm in at this very moment? And those numbers used to be a little bit higher, just about the same, actually. But back then, a lot of that was automated players, so they weren't actually that many players playing. So when you compare our population now to the population of 2009, and you say, hey, it hasn't really gone up, I think you have to take into account that a lot of players now are actual players.
Yeah, and that population increase due to bots started, I believe, really in 2007. It really started jacking up in 2007, 2008. And 2009 was when the big push came. And then I think the precursor to team security started working in like 2010, 2011 timeframe. And I think 2011 is when team security, with a emphasis on botting, actually took off. I think it was 2011 or 2012.
Yeah, I think the population, by the way, for almost all EVE players, population is a big deal, because people want to know that the investments they're making in this game are going to last, right? And EVE is one of those games that is really beat. I don't know it's really stood out because it's been around for 15, 16 years now, and it's still a vibrant game. It's still got a strong following. In talking to some of the devs at EVE Vegas, I believe they were thinking, EVE will probably never die, because there's definitely a core of people that will just not stop playing this game. So it'll survive even with a diminished population. But the idea is to get more population on top of that. So for all EVE players, as we look at this investment of time and energy and knowledge and all the stuff that we put into this game, is this game going to be alive? The answer is yes. How alive depends on, how we measure it. And one of the measures is looking at, how many people are playing this game at one time. I have noticed one thing on this population. When I played, my late hour, which is Pacific time US, used to have about 18,000 concurrent players on at the same time. And then during European time zone and US time zone, it would swell up to like 30 or 40,000, at one point 50,000. And then it would come way back down to like, to 20,000 or whatever. And now I notice that it's a lot more even. Like my time zone is very well populated at like 20, 26,000. And European is like 36,000. So it's kind of flattened out quite a bit. It isn't like this huge European bubble and then it kind of gets quiet.
That might be due to the Chinese influx. Like when I was mining a couple nights ago, I had somebody from Ranger Regiment sitting in the station. He was just AFK, but yeah, somebody from Ranger Regiment. All his information was in his info page was Chinese, everything like that. So yeah, I think that's probably part of the reason.
All right, Carneros, do you have anything else before I throw it to Ashterothi on why bots are a bad thing?
No, I want. Let's hear what Ashterothi has to say, and then we'll go on and talk about the police skins and some of the other stuff.
Yeah, those police skins are awesome.
Appropriate.
All right, so Anthron commented earlier that he doesn't agree that there is a bot problem because the game has survived for 15 years, so clearly it's not that big of an issue. So first of all, bots are a problem, and RMT is a problem in a lot of MMOs, but there are two specific reasons why they are more impactful in EVE than more theme parky MMOs. The first of which is that arguably the marquee feature of EVE Online is its market. Yeah, okay, sorry. Anthron did not actually say that it wasn't a problem, but he didn't. Either way. So the market itself is so valuable to EVE that whereas in WoW, if the auction house suddenly becomes ballooned and like everything's crazy and overinflated, that doesn't matter as much. But in Eve, if the market was to break, that would effectively break the game. The other thing is that traditionally in MMOs, every few years, there's an expansion, and that expansion generally creates a hard reset. This is how a lot of theme park MMOs deal with these kinds of issues, in the fact that all they do is they basically raise the value of the currency by some factor, which basically makes all of the previous attempts to collect currency moot. So every few years, they basically wipe out all of the progress of all of these different botters. That does not happen in Eve. Expansions expand upon the current existing functionality, not actually adding, it doesn't bring everything up to a whole nother scale. So because of those two reasons, botting can have an unusually high amount of effect on the actual gameplay of Eve, and also it's unusually difficult to fix it if it ever actually becomes a problem.
And another thing, just to address why botting itself is bad, there's a couple reasons. One is load on the server. The CCP published some graphs of server usage after Unholy Rage, which were very enlightening. So that's number one. Number two is it feeds into RMT, and when you have an RMT scene and people know that you can go and you can get stuff, then in order to keep getting the money, hackers know that they can come to an MMO, and if they've hacked somebody, they get the list. They know that they can try to hack old accounts and sell stuff off that way. That's another reason why the botting happens, because it helps institute a culture of rule breaking, which then can attract hackers, and then they start attacking accounts instead of just having bots in game.
Yeah, the CCP security team in the dev blog says things that you can do to help us with this fight. And one is two-factor authentication. They said, do this on your Eve accounts and then do this on your email accounts, because it doesn't do much good to protect your Eve accounts if your email is hacked and they can just reset things from there. So we've talked about this many times on the show before. Not all of us have done it. I'm not going to make you put up a show of hands since we're on a podcast, but so don't put your hand up, dude. Okay, so then, but we're going to talk to you about you should do this, and here's how. Matterall, tell them how.
Okay. So two-factor authentication. Well, it's first of all, it's a really good tip. Make sure that your email is 2FA, they call it, as well, so that they don't get in that way. Because once they have your email, they really have control of your email, right? They can do a bunch of stuff with that, whatever accounts you have. But you also want to protect the game on top of that. And inside of the accounts page, and I'll have to do this by memory because we don't have it up, but maybe we'll get McLeod to put that up. Inside of the accounts page, there is, when you're looking at the area where it shows your account and what other characters are on that account and that kind of stuff, there is a two-factor authentication button, and you would click on that. And that brings you to a different page that has a little barcode. Now, you'll need something on your phone. I suppose that everybody who plays EVE Online probably has a cell phone with a camera on it. And applications, I know on the iPhone, there's... Remember, this goes out to different countries and everything else, but most people have the ability to use two-factor authentication on their phone and
all right,
a barcode, and it goes into... Am I lagging?
So, yeah.
Oh.
We'll jump in here and say you can download a Google Authenticator app to put on your phone. Doesn't matter what kind of phone smartphone you have, it'll work. And you do want to put authentication on both. If your account gets hacked and they clean out all of your stuff in Eve, it will take CCP months to replace it all and get you back up and running. Months. It will be so painful. You will hate it. Please get yourself locked up. And you're helping the rest of the community by keeping your assets locked.
Am I back up?
If you've got rights in your corporation or alliance.
So if you guys can hear me, I'll try to finish real quick. So you can use Google Authenticator, or you can use another program called Authy, A-U-T-H-Y. And that's the one I recommend because that holds your codes online so that you don't have it just in the phone. And the problem is with Google Authenticator, if you lose the phone or the phone goes away, your codes go with it. You might be able to get them off Google account. I'm not sure how that works, but I've run into a problem where Google Authenticator just deleted a couple of two-factor authentications that I had set up. And what that means is you have to prove that that's your account because you'll never get past the second authentication. So you have to write CCP and say, this is actually my account. And it takes like 4 or 5 days to get that all reset, which is a big bummer. So I changed to using Authy on my phone. And again, it's as easy as snapping a picture of that barcode. It sets it up for you. Cool thing about Apple, which is what I use, if you copy it on your phone, you can paste it in your computer. So whenever I run up against a prompt to authenticate, copy on the phone, paste in the computer, and I'm off and running. And that really works. It's a pain, but it's not that big a pain. And it's certainly a big help later on when you don't get your stuff taken. And if you don't think people will take your stuff because nothing's happened in the past, nothing ever happens in the past until it happens to you. And then you're just another victim that says, hey, you guys, you should really do this. And there's a lot of people telling us that because they got screwed up. So avoid that. Avoid being the victim before you get victimized.
I do want to also mention that as part of that the security team worked with the art team at CCP. And they put together, in commemoration of the moment, a couple more police skins. Now, the police skins are hysterical fun. If your corporation or your alliance in EVE has never done this before, every now and then you'll get an FC who'll call up a police fleet roam, and everyone will be encouraged to put a police skin on their ship, and they'll take them all out together and act like crazy people. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Now, they introduced 2 more police skins this week, and they did it based on as a nod to the bad guys, so to speak. And they picked the 2 ships that the bad guys have been using to do botting in. So they made a police skin for the Nyx class supercarrier and the Vexor class cruiser. And that made me smile. Who doesn't want to mix with a police skin?
Everybody wants to be a cop. Oh my God.
That's fun. No, there's not a lot of RP happening in EVE, but you can have a lot of fun even if you're not into role playing.
Can you imagine something the size of a Nyx with those lights on that we're watching here on screen, and then having fire tails like fly out of it as drones? That would be so cool. It'd be like a moving police station.
You have to go whoop whoop.
There was one more thing in the blog though, and that is they floated a trial balloon. It was very subtle. Maybe you missed it. They're thinking about taking pieces of functionality in the game that are currently available to alpha players and moving it behind an Omega paywall, and not to make money, but to reduce botting and hacking and cheating. So you'd have to have at least one Omega account somewhere to be able to do X and Y. And they did not float enough trial balloon for us to see what it was that they're thinking of locking behind screens. But what do you guys think of that idea?
This is an incredibly common strategy, especially among free-to-play games. Basically, either you have to be a paid account to do specific actions, or one of the more common things is actually once you've paid for the first time, that kind of unlocks another tier, right? So now this may not work necessarily in EVE, but for instance, I think in Rift, if you've never spent money in Rift, you're not even allowed to use the market. As soon as you spend any money, doesn't matter what you've bought. It could be a subscription, it could be a skin, or whatever. Then you're allowed to do those kinds of things. You just have to invest a little bit. It sounds to me like they're playing with that same kind of idea, where either you have to be Omega or you have to have invested somehow in order to unlock certain functionality.
Well, assume that they might be watching the show. So if you've got any feedback for them now, type it into Stream Chat. Speak up if you're on the panel. Let people know what you think, because the team will be listening, and they specifically floated this because they want to hear your reactions.
Yeah, the example that's given is something like level 4 or 5 courier missions. So basically activities that maybe players aren't, like active players are not totally invested in, but people that exploit the system would gravitate towards.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing about removing the level 4s from alphas for distribution bots makes sense. I almost want to suggest just turning all the level 4 distribution bots in HiSec to level 3, and then that way, if you want to run the level 4s and make the big bucks, that you have to go to low sec. However, I kind of run distribution missions myself for some cash, and so that might be me being biased and wanting to get rid of the competition.
There's also an additional problem here, which is, again, unlike other MMOs, the unique nature of EVE means that pretty much anything that can be bought with a premium currency can also be bought with a non-premium currency, i.e. in-game money. And that has the practical effect of whatever limit you put in it, it's just now cost of doing business, right? So if I just have to Plex an account once in order to start botting with it, then it may not actually be impactful.
All right. Is there anything else on this that we want to cover?
I guess what I mean is, like, so before there were alpha accounts, Plexing your account was a cost of doing business, and people still bought it then. So I don't think it would be a golden bullet to go back to requiring you to Plex to do these activities.
Joe?
So ultimately, the whole thing about this bots, I think the most critical point that we can hit on is that for the health of our game, you guys need to stop buying your ISK through these third-party sources, because that's where all the bots come from to begin with. And at the end of the day, it's just not worth it. If I spend 4 hours in a gaming session and 2 hours of that is dealing with bots, it's not a good deal for us.
Okay, moving on to more CCP news. This week, they put out the January patch. You got to see things like asteroids shrink and blow up as you mine them when they get depleted. Things like that. That's live in the game now. Yeah, well, that's, they look just like this. So that's live. But what's next? Gamers always want to know what's next. So luckily, CCP has their updates page where they always tell you what's coming next. There's no date for the next one. And, that's it just says winter. So they're working on it right now. A couple things in it. We can expect some balance changes. I imagine some of it will be ship related, but some of it will be behind the scenes, like how fast it takes for certain anomalies to respawn and little things that they're tweaking behind the scenes. And then in addition, the agency is getting a user interface redesign. Okay, it could be anything. Skins for structures. A lot of people are excited about that. I know that, your corp or your alliance puts a lot of work in, builds your first Keepstar. You want to put a skin on the thing, So, that's fun. But the big thing in the next patch, and the dogs won't bring next to me, the big thing on the next patch is the 64-bit EVE client. Okay, that's probably governing the timing of the next patch, because that's a big thing, and it's, dog's messing up my green screen. And then that's a big it's going to have a hangover effect also, because it's going to require potentially some bug fixing and reduction of technical debt immediately afterwards to get it stable. We don't know the date for when it's coming, but it is very soon now. And the word on the street is that CCP has 64-bit clients running in-house now and are testing them. If you see CCP send out an invitation for mass tests on Singularity on the test server, please help them. You are helping all of us.
What's the big deal with the 64-bit client? Why is that such a big deal?
Well, it opens up a bunch of things. It means that certain kinds of crashing behavior that people are dealing with because they're running out of memory will have a lot more overhead breathing room, because suddenly you've got a lot more memory you can address in your client. You're not trying to get by with, it's like a scuba diver with a small tank on his back. When you run out of air, you just have to come up to the surface. Imagine, Ash, you explain it.
Well, just so a 32-bit system can only allocate about 4 gigs of RAM to any given thing, because that's how big a 32-bit register can be. Whereas a 64-bit register can allocate a lot more. So yeah, I think you're pretty much right. It allows you to throw more resources at the problem. It's always good also that your program is running at the same kind of pace as the OS that it's running in. But
what are the real world differences we should see?
I suspect that the actual client side will be more stable in larger fights. Not necessarily affecting anything on the server side, but like your client locking up may not happen as much, or crashes or that kind of stuff when it's pushed to its extreme. That's my guess. But I mean, we haven't seen it yet, so we'll have to see what the actual improvements are.
Well, I get it's an improvement, and we have a list in chat there telling us, like, memory-wise, how it would be a big improvement with memory. At least the computer memory would be essentially infinite. But I wonder what the real world experience is. Like, how will people know, oh, this is much better than it was before?
Well, it will not be better for some people. If you're one of those groups who likes to go around in a small gang behind large fleets and pick off all the people that got disconnected trying to jump into the next system, life is not going to be as good for you.
Will be worse.
Yes, you're going to have fewer disconnected, helpless pilots waiting in space. We call that PvP in some circles. That's not, but if you're one of those people who got in a big fleet and went to help out your team, and you're worried every time you jump through a gate with the crowd, are you going to actually emerge in the next system? This would be great for you.
All right, so I'm going to be facetious. This is a pro Goon Swarm patch, the 64-bit client, or a pro.
Your guys disconnect too, bro.
Especially PL and NC. This is, pro them. And the little guy that doesn't belong to these big groups won't be able to pick off the big guys anymore, because you guys have a 64-bit client, which will suck up a ton of development time, et cetera, et cetera. Go ahead, Noisy. And
for you, particularly, Matterall, as you are wanting to start streaming big fights and everything, your cameraman should have less problems streaming the fight.
Nice.
Okay, I like this. We'll take it.
There's also an ongoing theme where, and not just EVE, but other MMOs also, where they'll say, here's what's coming in the next upgrade. Look at these cool features. And a chunk of the player base will say, don't give us cool new features. Fix the stuff you have now. That's a really, really strong popular opinion among a lot of people. Well, here's CCP delivering that for you. We're fixing stuff, and it requires us to update our tech, and this is a good thing. We should be supportive.
I think it's just the CSM that cries about balancing and fixing personally. But somebody does bring up an interesting point. Will this help multi-boxers? That's a big deal.
I don't know much about multi-boxing other than watching it happen sometimes near me. I do them all each manually, and I don't try to warp multiple work rules to the grid at the same time. I don't know. Does someone else know?
Yeah, I don't think that would have too much of an effect on it, because your ability to multi-box is more limited by your personal RAM, because any given client has its own memory pool allocated to it.
Yeah, so it says it looks like people are saying it won't really help much, but
no. But one of the things I was thinking about. Sorry.
I think it might hurt because you've got a set amount of RAM, and the processors are going to be using up more of that RAM. So it's possible that your performance is going to go down because each processor is going to be actually trying to grab more RAM and more memory.
Well, so Eve is coded in stackless Python with some C++. And so their ability to allocate memory dynamically should be pretty good. So I don't see it being that impactful. One of the things I have thought about, though, is that it may actually increase the amount of visuals that they can have playing at any given time. Like, on our ship skins, for a long time, they didn't have particle effects or any of that kind of stuff because it would be an undue load. Those are the kinds of things that actually could possibly be upped if you are able to allocate more resources.
Or could you actually show brackets in big fights?
Listen, if you guys want to talk about this after the show, we pile into the public channel on TIS Discord. Join us. We'll have a discussion about what 64-bit client is good and bad for. Anybody's welcome to join this public channel. You can sit there and lurk and listen to other people talk, but that's where we all go on this show after every show. It's a good way to meet your heroes, too, if they're on this show. Speaking of heroes, let's introduce Joe again, or at least have him talk about what he does, and then we'll get to talking about LowSec. How you doing, Joe?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. I didn't know I was anybody's hero, so that's the news to me.
Clearly, I can see the audience, the people saying hi to you and all that kind of thing. What is it you do?
Well, that's what is it exactly that I do? I think the general idea is that I undock and go out and shoot at every single thing I can shoot at that I have any chance at all of killing. So it doesn't matter if it's Sino, Ibis or something, or if it's your Thanatos, it's going to get shot at. Just check the fit, see how it's fit up.
I've been watching some of your videos. It's pretty funny. The some of the stuff that, you're really you're playing the game and talking to your fans as you're playing. And there's a fair number of fans that are watching you do these things. But are you specifically someone that roams around LowSec, or do you move all over the place?
So I get all over the place, but I probably spend 99% of my time in low security space. That's the space where the targets are the most accessible. Movement is easy. Getting from one place to another, there's no bubbles. And there's lots of pirates out there to fight. So it's just a lot of people out there to fight in general.
How often are you overmatched, or you do come up against something that's actually difficult? And I'm asking that from a perspective of, if I'm a relatively new guy and I kind of want to start fighting other players, but I don't want to get swarmed all the time. I want to do one-on-one or one-on-two or three. How often do you come across like a situation where you could possibly win or a normal person could possibly win?
Well, I am a normal person in most regards. I think that to have success at the game, you kind of need to look at the game the same way that you would look at an arcade game. So when you're losing ships, it's very similar to losing lives in Pac-Man or failing a level in Galaga. And in a sense, depending on how you fund your PvP, you could also be putting quarters into the machine once in a while. Get emotionally disconnected from your ship and get a lot of inexpensive ships that you'll enjoy flying, and you should have a lot of fun. How often you outmatch it? This gets back to the age-old question of, what does this person consider to be a good fight? I think any fight where there's explosions are a good fight. I'll never win. 10 versus 1 if I don't go fight 10 people at once. And this is something that happens. We do. We win those fights. We win fights where we're up ship 3 or 4 classes. If you're not taking them, you'll never win them. It's a lot of fun when you win a fight like that, and the glory is insane, right?
Yeah. Well, I like your advice on calibrating your expectations to take the defeats in a way of like, hey, it's just another quarter, man. Don't sweat it. But I wonder, like, because I get this from people. They're like, well, fighting solo is dead because somebody always has a partner or a second client they're using, and they're going to jam you up before you get a chance to really fight. Do you run into that all the time, or is that just overblown?
I think if you spend 4 hours out doing low-sec PvP and you're on a decent route, you'll probably run into a couple of gate camps that you should have known where they were at and who it was. You'll probably run into a few small gangs. So if you're using D-scan and you don't want those fights, you can avoid them. I think most of the folks who are saying that stuff are the same guys who sit docked up watching station ads all the time. They're not really out there, or they're hiding behind their fleet. The solo PvP is definitely alive. I mean, my kill board just from this morning is one solo kill after another.
Oh, okay. So that is overblown.
Absolutely.
EVE Online is a game all about fixing the problems in front of you, right? So if you keep dying to gate camps, you could say, oh, well, gate camps are the problem, or you could figure out how to avoid them. So that's really what it boils down to, is that a lot of players don't want to go through that effort.
How do you avoid a gate camp?
Well,
you go around.
Yeah. You can use your map to see how whether or not there's like a lot of kills right on a border system, because that's usually where the gate camps are.
Check first to see if the gate's even up. Maybe there's no problem. Don't check to see if the skyscraper's there with your face. Check, from a distance with your scout, that kind of thing.
I would venture to say, I really think 9 out of the 10 people who complain about gate camps are jumping from Norvikaiken to Tama.
That's a long distance, or that's a short distance, but in a very populated, dangerous area.
Number 1 worst gate camp in all of EVE for low sec is right there. Number 2 is going to be Hades to a boon. And both of those are entirely avoidable. You just do not need to ever go through those.
Is Rancer still one of those gates, or is that not a big deal anymore?
Not so much lately.
Well, I guess because Heck is no longer a... Well, Rancer used to be, if I'm not mistaken, a choke point, a low-sec choke point and shortcut that industrialists would use to move their goods back and forth through 2 hubs. But one of those hubs is diminished in usage, so I guess that would diminish that choke point.
Yeah, they got bots for that now.
Bots for what?
I was just to haul things because of the courier count there.
Well, anyway, the point is that Joe is making is that you should know what the dangerous choke points are or the gates are, and you're able to go around the 2 that are most dangerous, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you're out in a 8 to 10 millionist frigate and you lose it to a gate camp, you say, okay, well, I'll go get another ship. Let me get a different route, and I'll get around that. Because at any given time, there aren't 100 gate camps up. In all of low sec at any given time, maybe there's 3 or 4. Or maybe there's a fleet moving through somewhere. But you can get around that stuff. In a frigate, if you get in a bigger ship and you fall into the trap of, okay, I want to fight cruisers or above, the whole dynamic changes. Your align time increases, and what can catch you changes.
Yeah, so let's say you get through the choke point. Like, what are some of the, as a hunter, what are some of the things that you enjoy or advice that you could give other people that are interesting?
So I love the hunt. I love going out there, and you never know what's going to be in the next system. You never know who's going to be in the next system. I enjoy the process of learning who the people are and what they're actually out there doing, what activity are they performing in. So maybe you've got, a guy and he always has Loki, and he's got some good Punisher bait out there, and he's just always there. Or, you learn, okay, well, Mr. Chunky owns Kadama, so if I'm going to go there, I'm going to have to fight Mr. Chunky, and I got maybe a 1 in 50 shot of beating him. So you learn who the people are, and I think also in LowSec there's really a pirate culture that goes on, where as you lose ships, take good fights, take uphill battles, you get street credit, and people start to recognize that gets me through a lot of gate camps. The guys just don't kill me because they want me to be out doing what I'm doing, and they're nice about it.
Oh, wow, they literally have that kind of.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a thing. The low-sec respect type thing, it's definitely there. That being said, it doesn't let you undock a 2 billion-isk Lashak without snuff blowing it up, but it lets you roam around in your breachers and kestrels and rifters and things like that pretty well unscathed.
So go ahead, Ash.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in there one thing. Pro tip when it comes to like losing ships and fighting wherever you are, don't lose your head. One of the things that I always see, or I frequently see in EVE, is someone will die and they think that maybe if they go back and get a bigger ship or a more expensive ship or a whatever and come back, they'll be able to like seek vengeance upon those who have wronged them. This never goes well. If you get lost, if you die, just figure out what happened, try something different.
So another aspect of low-sec is surviving in low-sec. If you're not someone who is hunting, there is trying to harvest the area that is a little more lucrative than high-sec space, high-security space. And that is something that NoizyGamer has done for a long time as a miner. He goes and he mines out stuff, which is unheard of, really, in any low-sec space. But he does it in Minmatar space. Is that right, Noisy?
Yeah, I poke around Minmatar space. I would actually mine in faction warfare space because it was safer to mine in faction warfare space because people would wander in, but they'd want to fight at the plexes. So I would be okay. And that was okay until the NPC mining fleets came in and took over my system. So now I'm in non faction warfare space. And it's as long as you keep your head and know what you're doing, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah. And we have Sutania in the audience, who's another low-sec PvPer. I wanted to ask really quickly some of your good memories, Joe, and maybe some of your bad memories. Like, what are some of your highlights, favorite kills, maybe?
Favorite kills. Oh, this is such a great question. I wish I would have prepared for it. So very recently, I took a Tempest up to Tama and got in a fight with a small gang from Snuffed Out, and I killed a Nightmare and their light tackle, which was a succubus. It was really blingy. And it was just an awesome fight. It lasted for a long time, and we didn't get blob. We actually got to have the fight. Bad memories. It's a good memory, but it's a bad memory. I combat probed a Thanatos down, and he was in a level 5 mission, and I was able to get over there, push him off of his, get him off of his mobile depot, and he had maybe 20% hull left as I was signature tanking him when the rats got a hold of me. I think I made a mistake switching out of defensive mode in my Jackdaw. It increased my signature, and the rats ECM me and he got away. So it's a good memory in that I was glad I was able to get the fight and perform well in it, but it's bad in that I didn't get the kill.
In my mind, I'm imagining Alliance tournament trophy ships flying around in circles in low-sec and wrecking the fun for regular people. Do you ever come across those?
So yeah, maybe once a month I'll see an AT ship, but straight talk.
Do you drop what you're doing and try to get those? Okay.
No, those are hard to get, and most of the people that have them aren't trying to kill me anymore. It's too dangerous. Seriously, it is.
Wow.
If I'm streaming and they pull out an AT ship, that's a lot of eyes on that, right? And
Oh, yeah.
so they have to pretty much use it and be done with it for a while. That's kind of what I mean. It's not so much that I'm dangerous to the AT ship.
So when you're
Yeah.
streaming, how hard is it to keep balance by talking to your fans and concentrating so you don't do something embarrassing?
You know, I've always hung out with people while I was playing games, whether it was on comms or in some other way. And so I kind of converted hanging out with people on TeamSpeak to hanging out with people in Twitch chat. And it all works really seamlessly to me. I almost never lose a ship because of lack of focus because of something that's going on with my Twitch channel. It's usually more lack of focus that's going on with all the children I have sired here.
I'm imagining like 12 to 15 running around your chair.
If you could ask CCP to tweak one thing about Eve to make it more streamable or a more visually exciting experience or something, what comes to mind?
Okay, so if I can only ask CCP for one thing, it's going to be this. Every time I get in a new ship, I have to reorganize the modules to my hotkeys. They need to put those bubbles on the fitting window where I can pre-select where I want everything laid out at and then save it with the fit. It's not exactly what you asked, but if I can only ask for one thing, that's what I want because it's giving me carpal tunnel syndrome. I blow up too many ships.
I bet CCP Kutkur would love to hear that. She could probably do that. All right. Let's see if we can get her to her.
She's the software engineer that does the little things, and those are the, what do they call them? Quality of life changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the little things that make the biggest difference, for sure.
They really do.
I think graphically the game is absolutely stunning.
Yeah. Do you play with full graphics on?
I do. I'm able to stream and play the game sometimes with multiple clients open with graphics on the highest settings. No problem at all. I do have a new PC now, but it's only a few months old. And before I was still doing the same thing on a 6-year-old PC. So I'm incredibly pleased with the client.
So the game looks good. The quality of life changes are good usually for veteran players normally, right? At least that's how they're positioned. Because they make a thing that, like you just described, that's aggravating. It makes that go away. That's totally different than the new game experience for people that probably puts things in that make stuff a little more time consuming for us. I'm not sure about that, but yeah. So anyway, if Carcor can take a look at that, it sounds like an interesting change. Now, where do you normally hang out so I can avoid you?
That's pretty easy. Yeah. So I live in Murthan. It's a system that's right off of a high-sec gate. But I also stage out of Sujarino, which is next to Tama.
Wow, you're in that hotbed.
Over up to the north side of all that. And then right where Shadow Cartel lives over in Sisseed, I stage out of there too. So the idea is being, if I die and get blown up, I'm only a few jumps away from ships. The whole process of going and using your medical clone to go back to Jita to buy another ship to then jump 8 jumps around the Norvikaiken gate, that's just a big boat of failure. You really want to be close to your ships, be able to go, okay, so that ship's blown up, let me just go get another one, hop in that ship. And if you need a different engagement profile, having 5 or 6 different kinds of ships will solve that for you as well.
You know, that's funny. I was at one point, and this isn't completely dead, but I was going to put down keep stars in low sec. Like that was going to be the thing that I did, and it's going to use all my resources to do that. And then I talked to a couple of guys like you, low sec PvPers, and I thought, well, you know, the PvPers will benefit too because they can use these keep stars as bases, you know, and they can, you know, we'll fill them up with stuff so that they can have their equipment so they don't have to constantly run back and forth. And he said that's not how PvPers work at all. They are like following the herds. So they'll go where the action is. You don't put something down and say, here, come live here. They figure out where they want to live, and then you would put something over there, and that changes all the time.
Yes, it does change all the time. So in the past 3 months, Black Rise has slowed tremendously. Whereas Amar Minmatar space over in the Bleak Lands in that area has picked up tremendously. And so for a person like me, that means, okay, well, I need a jump freighter or two worth of ships to head down there. And I can always move over there anytime I want and clone over, reset my medical clone, and be operating just like I was if the action was only 3 jumps from home.
Right.
I mean,
So,
if you want to do the market thing, Matterall, what you want to do is you want to be able to set it up so that your market can move along with where the PvP is. You set up in a high sec system that's an entry into low sec. Set up your market there so you're not going to get attacked, and you should be okay.
Well, do you guys know of any low sec market? Because you're talking about low sec market, and I know of no low sec markets that have remained alive for any period of time. This
was an idea of like if you here's the first thing. The reason it would be a keep star, as Kush Hayes asked, is keep stars are very hard to imitate, right? They're expensive, and they can be, if they're taken down, that's 180 to 240 billion ISK gone, and a even snuff that would kind of hurt a little bit, and they're the biggest kid on the block in low sec. So it was going to be something that couldn't be imitated. So, if it was in low sec, it was unmistakable. That was a safe place to jump your jump freighter to, and therefore trade could happen. And they would all be one jump from another keep star, and there would be about 4 of them, all of them bordering high sec trade hubs. And so you could, just import stuff in really easily. It wouldn't take too much of an effort. And then there would be people who would, I guess, do that kind of thing. This is all conceptual, and nothing ever stands up. The concept never stands up to reality. So the idea, though, of planting these citadels where low sec could basically say, here's where I'll get my stuff, is just not the way people play the game.
If you want to, just conceptually, basically, if you want to be a market person like that, or a sales guy like that, you could role play Thucker really well. And because the Thucker are migratory and they move from place to place and place, and therefore you could be a Thucker tradesman or a Minmatar tradesman, and you just migrate along with the PvP from place to place to place, and you can role play that way.
Let me just point out that you were saying Thukker, Thucker, not a business.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, and that's really interesting, because that to me seems like it might be a very interesting gameplay, is to try to follow the ebbs and flows of piracy and try to supply these guys. That seems like a very interesting thing to do. Never thought of that. But the point I'm making is that the way that PvPers and low sec live is different than the way we imagine they live. I think you guys, or Joe, do you guys buy all your you buy all your modules in JITA, but you build all your ships? Is that, do you know, is that kind of normal?
I pretty well buy everything in JITA and have it jump freighted to a staging location and then fit it up. And, when you're talking about putting a keep star down in low sec, I mean, Snuff's going to blow that up unless you work something out with them. You're going to have to give them 180 billion ISK to work something out. And then I don't know how you ever make a profit on it. And even if you had it there and there was a ton of traffic, you're going to have the new Norvikaiken gate camp there, right? So people are going to have a problem going in and out. So I don't know how you would ever make it work. Neat idea, though.
The idea was, there was a deal in place, and it was, backed up by allegiance to Imperium, which I had to deal with, and that would prevent them from damaging it. And if I could prevent them, I could prevent everybody else. The problem was you can't account for what Snuff does. So they break off from the Imperium, and they're free from their obligations not to attack it. And so now I have to have it defended, and that becomes a whole different diplomatic relationship, which would have been easy enough to do, considering some of the friends that I have, but also it would have been possibly not possible because, you're sometimes, forming up a fleet for a different person, a different purpose is not something that's easy to do. It's only happened a few times on my behalf. Most of the time, people are like, "Well, why should we bail that guy out?" You know. So, and the other thing it does is it cements you to in-game relationships, and this show has to be completely divorced of that. So Carneros gave me a finger wag and said, "Stay out of that." And I was like, "You're right. At the end of the day, you're right. I need to stay out of the game itself." And to talk about the game in a non-biased way or a untangled way, disinterested way, you need to not have stakes in the game. So, how to divorce that. But anyway, this is really interesting. It's not an area that we talk a lot about, but I think this is also an area that gets a lot of coverage by streaming. Like a lot of streamers seem to be low-sec PvPers.
Yeah, there's a lot of activity there. I think that's the primary reason is it's very easy to go out in an inexpensive ship and get a fight. You know, you can get in a lot of fights in any given day, lots and lots of them. One right after another some days, like this morning. You know, it was so busy out there this morning, you couldn't go anywhere for there being things to fight where you were at.
What are some of the etiquettes of fighting people? Like, it's not like 1v1 at the sun, right? You see somebody and how do you decide, like, okay, this is going to be a fight?
Not blue, shoot it.
So literally, and there's other people you're not blue too that are just going to shoot you.
Yeah, that's right. So basically, we have as few blues as is possible and still have a functional system. So pretty much everybody is shooting everybody. Finding targets, you know, that's usually in the factional warfare sites. So the novice or outside the novice, something of that nature. And yeah, it's pretty much everybody shooting everybody.
Yeah. You know, I've always thought of this as that, you know, everybody's shooting everybody as something that I wanted to examine more. Like, why is it civilizations, like, at least in Eve, we all just decide that we want to kill the guy we're passing by, you know, who's doing whatever he's doing. Like, it seems like everybody's got that. And I'm just saying it seems this way, but everybody in the system in low-sec knows that this place is only for killing one another. If you're passing through, you're a stranger to this kind of culture. But in these low-sec areas, we all know we're here to fight each other.
So yeah, absolutely. I probably should have touched on there is low-sec etiquette.
Yeah, okay, good.
Don't use ECM. Because people won't like that. If you use ECM, you'll get tagged as the guy who used ECM, and people won't fight you anymore. The other thing is if you agree to a 1 versus 1 with somebody, then you need to honor your 1 versus 1. So your word is your bond, and it's important in low-sec because the pirates that are out there, and there are a lot of them, they will just start denying you fights. You'll get a bad reputation, and it's a real thing. Now,
and when you say if you agree to a 1 versus 1, you mean in discussion in local chat, right?
Exactly, in discussion in local chat. Or if I agree on stream to somebody. Basically, if you make that agreement, say we're going to 1 versus 1, and then you have a buddy that comes along and tags in on it, you need to SRP that person times 2 and apologize. Yeah, that's bad. You don't want that.
So what I'm
It'll get you
learning
kicked
here,
out of a lot of low-sec corps.
What I'm learning here is that I've ruined some low-sec etiquette in my time in faction warfare space quite a bit.
This is Elise Randolph.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah. Hey, how are you?
Hot drop.
How you doing? Yeah, Elise, we're talking about low-sec. So you've done that. You've actually said, "Hey, 1v1," and then somebody's joined you and killed the guy.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously it's not super honorable, but I've been involved in like where I'm fighting someone. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll 1v1 you. And then someone comes in that's in my fleet or not in my fleet, and they ruin it. I'm like, hey, I did my best. I said I wanted to do this myself. I was fine, but I've also used ECM before. That's a thing. I used to, back when off-grid links were a thing, I'd fly in like some really tanky ships and use off-grid links, as many people did, and just made it that much more durable. right? So like to me, it wasn't a means to have an advantage in a 1v1 situation, just when things escalate. That's why I liked having that ability. So if like 3 or 4 people started dogpiling on me, maybe I could stand a chance a little bit better with my lings. But then everyone started taking lings, so it was.
What I'm hearing here is that Elise is everything wrong with Eve.
I am actually, so for the longest time, well, not the longest time, but for one summer, back when LowSec was a little bit different, because LowSec has changed quite a bit since faction warfare has been introduced, and since the little beacons and novices have been added. Back then, or back in the day, you could just roam around LowSec and kill people. What I used to do was I'd fly around in a Drake and pretend I was ratting, and I'd have a cloaked basilisk right next to me. So whenever anyone would start fighting me, I'd get to like half shields, uncloak my basilisk, and start repping myself. And then the people would be like, oh, this is impossible. We can't kill him, so we're going to go chase the basilisk. So I'd let them chase the basilisk, which also had warp core stabs on it. So they'd get the basilisk glow, then it would just warp off. And
wait, cloaked and stabbed? How long was the lock time on that thing?
I had 2 sensor boosters, so it was fine. Okay. But I mean, as JoeBane says, after a while, like people were just like, I know you. I'm not going to give you any fight. So I had to like swap up with alts I use, and it was tricky. But it is nice to hear that LowSec, especially the people that are in there often. I've watched JoeBane stream because he likes to fly the Triglavian ships quite a bit. So I'm a big fan of the Kikamura. And I think it's one of the most fun ships that's been introduced since the Orthrus. And his stream is a good showcase of that ship.
Man, all I remember of Kikamuras is losing them. They die so easy. But it's so nice to be able to put 1,000 DPS on anything.
Yeah, those things are like super overpowered. You get like 3 or 4 of them. I know a few groups, a few wormhole groups are really fond of those Triglavian ships just because they're great for roaming.
Yeah, they have a lot of utility.
In general, have those new Triglavian ships seen a lot of usage? Is it going up? What's the trend with those?
From what I've seen, it's been a lot of people. The frigate isn't used all that much for whatever reason. Oddly enough, I think the frigates are used for the co-op abyssal sites more than anything else, more than PvP. But the battle cruiser and the cruiser and the battleship and basically every other one in there has been used increasingly more and more, especially by smaller gang stuff. I was looking at a few smaller groups, wormhole groups, and just like people who roam around, the people that are often derided as elite PvPers or whatever. They like the Triglavian ships because if you tackle something big, you can ramp up the DPS and kill it. So in the playstyle of I'm roaming around grabbing a ratting carrier or a ratting ship or a ratting rattlesnake or something, I can DPS it down really quickly before it escalates. Because in a traditional ship, you do like 400 DPS and that's pretty high. But in like, or even 600 DPS, and that's pretty high. But in these ships, once they ramp up, they do get close to 1,000, even from a small ship like a destroyer. And Modus asks in chat if anyone's used the Logi Triglavian ship. I have not seen that many people using them yet. I think it's just a time. Yeah, that's a Djokovic on the stream. That's the battle cruiser. It's like super useful. But I think it's just a learning time before people get to using the Zarmazd, which is the logistic ship, because it's weird for a logistic ship because it ramps up as well. So generally when you want logistics, you want the maximum efficiency straight on. But with the Triglavians, it does ramp up, but it's not super bad. I would like to use it. I want people to use it on me.
I think that there are 2 things that are causing the adoption of Triglavian ships to be a little bit slower. One, they are kind of difficult to understand. They fly differently than other ships because of the nature of them, and so it might be intimidating to some people. But more importantly, the process of acquiring the skill books, you have to get them from the Abyss. And some of those skill books are extremely rare and are the most valuable things that come out of the Abyss. So you're talking about 500 million for a medium weapon specialization book. So the barrier to entry for these ships are actually really high, but you are seeing more and more people adopt them over time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Especially when it comes to like the big logjam is the destroyer skill book. That one's I think like 300 or 400 million by itself.
Yeah, the other issue is that when they brought in the destroyer and battlecruiser, they made the destroyer actually a prerequisite for the cruiser. So I know, like for me, I hadn't trained into the cruiser yet, so I actually had to go back and get the destroyer book before I could even train into a Vedmak.
Yeah, luckily I got grandfathered in because I just was neurotic and injected those skills as soon as they came out, or as soon as I could get them, because I'm also neurotic in that I wanted to get them myself. I didn't want to buy them. Just a matter of principle, even though I know that makes no sense.
No, I'm doing the same thing.
But yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And someone in chat asked what makes the frigate not that popular. I think it's just a matter of how frigate PvP works. Like the slot layout's a little bit wonky, and in frigate PvP you don't really have that time to ramp up so much, because frigate PvP you generally think of as like 1v1 or like 2v1 type things. So if you're in like a crewer, you're super tanky and you can disable someone 2v1, and that's fine because you have low DPS, but the effect ramps up because but you're just really tanky at the same time. The frigate doesn't really synergize too well with the ramping up, I don't think. But the Damovic does look cool, and there's like skins for them too, which I have also neurotically purchased for no reason, but they're great.
Sorry, I think, can you guys hear me, or is my voice all messed up?
Yep,
You're good now.
Okay, sounds good.
So I think something happens with my internet, like every hour they decide to throttle me or something, but all of a sudden everything goes kind of robot-y for about a minute. Okay, well, thanks for jumping in, Elise and Ashterothi and Joe. Let's move on to wrapping up the show since we hit the hour-and-a-half mark. If you don't mind, we need to do some announcements. Oh, but real quick, nullsec. We usually take that on. That's usually what the show focuses on. We're trying to like do, many different topics now, not just nullsec. But real quick, what do we know that's happened in nullsec in the last week that's kind of important? Okay.
Well, let's see. There's a Skill U doing some stuff down in where is that?
I heard Tess had a very successful deployment.
All right. So, Carneros, while you look that up, test, or at least a communication by Villy, who is their leader. And by the way, I listened to Open Comms the other night, and I think it was Brisk said, I'm going to mess up Villy's name like Matterall messes it up. I never mess up Villy's name. I mess up every other name. I just don't mess up Villy's name. I got that one right. But a communique came out from him. He is a leader of tests. He's one of the FCs that is leader of test. Excuse me, there are different leaders of tests. There's Sapporo Jones, who's the CEO. You have diplomats, and you have FCs. And so one of the main FCs is Pro God Legend. The other main FC is Villy, and Villy has also been, I think, doing a lot on the diplomatic front as well, since he is formerly from Goon Swarm, and Imperium and Test have kind of like bonded. Anyway, all that to say, so he's an important figure, and he has put out a communique that was released to the public, and I believe it said, anyone want to characterize it?
The TLDR is this deployment didn't go as planned, or didn't do exactly what we wanted to do. It was successful for the first few stages of it, but in this last stage, it wasn't where we wanted to. So we're going to pull back because there's no need for us to push any forward and or to push more forward to force this objective. So we're just going to dial it back a little bit, and then we'll be working with some friends, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, going forward to get more content.
Which friends do you think they're talking about?
I have no idea. It's a big mystery. No, just kidding. It's they're going to be working with Goon 6 a little bit more, I believe. So
what he means by Goon 6 is special interest groups that are sort of smaller groups inside the Imperium that run around and do things together, usually in the same time zone or around a certain type of ship or something.
So, okay, so they ran into the resistance came from Horde, PL, NC, and really in the form of super capitals that were able to really just knock the heck out of these dread bombs, or basically dreadnought fleets that were destroyed to the tune of 200 or 300 dreadnoughts, which is a lot of money loss.
Yeah, exactly. So they tried to do some dread bomb shenanigans, but unfortunately, the test or tappy, however you want to call them, they're getting now firsthand knowledge, or just got firsthand knowledge of how difficult it is to use a dread bomb into someone else's super cap umbrella. I know PL and NC have had the same issues when they were fighting test, when they were using their super capital umbrella. Our dread bombs were ineffective most times. But so Tappy are learning this issue firsthand. They're experiencing the growing pains of what it means to deploy with no super caps into a group that has quite a few super caps.
So if they really wanted to force this, they have to move their super caps north.
Exactly, yeah. And I think they have a little code name for that, but I think because now groups have a shield supercap doctrine and an armor supercap doctrine, just because one's a little bit better for ratting and one's a little bit better for PvP as people try and make the transition. I know a few groups have wanted to transition to shield from armor, and maybe some vice versa. But Goons for Existence have a very strong shield supercap wing that they don't necessarily PvP with, or initially their plan wasn't to PvP with it. It's just those were all to run some sites. So now they just have this massive shield supercap wing that they can deploy anywhere they want, like a secondary supercap umbrella type thing.
Oh, interesting. And so last year, 2018, we saw actual deployments of super capital fleets, one against another in the north and in the south, and what that looked like. And that was huge, with a huge amount of, well, I guess, expensive ships, confronting one another in risky ways. So it could be another dramatic year, but not today, because Tess says we're going to dial this back and do something else. Do we know what else they're going to do? Is it Kavala?
I think they're just going to be focusing more on not like large scale type things, but more, and this is just me guessing, just more like roaming type gang things and just getting action for their members, because if you're in a PvP group, you're going to want a PvP at some point. So you don't have to have this massive, huge war to go and do it. You can go in the campus system and you can watch the metrics drop. So you can have like those attaboys, even if you don't get kills. So at least you're getting some sort of feedback from your deployment, some positive feedback from your deployment in metrics other than kills, right? Because EVE Online players have been pretty good at denying enemies kills, but you can't deny enemies who are camping your systems the metrics of you not ratting there because it's dangerous.
Right. So the other area that seems to be kind of on fire, there's two other areas. First, you have Pureblind, where Triumvirate's trying to get a foothold. And there's some stuff going on there. It's skirmish related. Sometimes their Triumvirate is backed up by NC and the North, because there's some old friendships there. But let's move over to Kavala Expanse, which was an area that was being used as a money-making area for I guess Horde at one point, and that has been what happened there. Carneros, did you guys take that over or something?
No, let's see. The Imperium started attacking with SIGs and tactical narcotics, TNT, deployed up to a section up there as sort of like a side project, because they were, they wanted some action and there was no big war going. So they started doing things. They attacked iHubs, and a good dozen or so went down this week. But I think the times when, and this would sometimes involve some test guys and sometimes just SIGs and TNT, or I'm not sure exactly. A few times they would, a SIG leader would say, ping a fleet in Delve, pick something that can fit through a wormhole, and then take fleets through wormhole chains up to come if there was signs of really big hostiles forming. So a few times I jumped in those fleets and went up there with them just to participate and know what's going on and feel the vibe and be there on the spot. There were some fun fights. Some of them would take place in low-sec just outside of Geminid and Kalevala. Some of them would go into Kalevala and skirmish. You'd be jumping around and inside a system trying to pin down highly mobile fleets and have fights with them, and it would go well or not. It's a lot of fun. But the things that I participated in generally either stayed small enough not to trigger the super cap umbrella response, or the cap umbrella response would come and we would sort of stop what we're doing and disengage and go somewhere else, do something else.
Last question on this, and that is the super cap umbrella, the area of influence that super caps can jump to and protect, which is the North did Test's invasion. What does that entice Test to want to, like, at a later point, fully commit and bring, all the supers that they have up? Or is that not? Obviously, it worked as a deterrent in this case, but from what I was hearing, it was every time that PL and NC drop all their supers, it looks enticing to Imperium and Test Legacy Coalition to come up and to fight that.
I think from an FC's perspective, a lot of the times when you deploy and you deploy supers with your main group, you do use that as a deterrent to escalation. It's not necessarily the supers themselves, it's the threat of dropping the supers themselves more than anything else, right? So if Tappy had their super cap fleet and Imperium super cap wing up there with them and they dropped the dreads, maybe that would make PL and NC balk for 5-10 minutes on whether or not they should drop or not, or maybe on this fight, yes, but on the next fight, no. And maybe that gives them a bit of an advantage. And I think that's a larger advantage than actually dropping the caps themselves. But that's just me.
Psychological advantage.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of the times, at least that's how PL was predicated in the past when we would bring supers. Most of the time was just to deter people from escalating beyond what we wanted to deal with at the time, right? So if we had their super cap wing, then we know that the opponent wouldn't necessarily want to bring in a bunch of triage carriers or what are now faxes to curb any bleeding that they're doing, because then the threat would be that, we just drop harder and faster on them. Yeah.
And plus you have to think that these are all calls that FCs have to make at the time. And there's only a few people who can really mobilize the heavy hardware and that sort of thing. So as a challenger, you would basically have to commit. You'd have to be a certain person to commit all the resources to come up and to fight head to head with the big stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, even then, so even if, let's say, the Tappy had their entire super cap force up there, if Vili or Progod wasn't around during like a big fight, maybe PL and NCR would still pause for a little bit, being like, oh, well, maybe they could still do it. Maybe we won't do this, that, whatever. So that's what I think is the big advantage to having them.
Yeah, and that's true. You have to. Sorry, you have to have your big. You have to have your big FCs committed to the duration of a big conflict when your supers are engaged, and that's a big deal. Sorry, go ahead, Carneros.
Yeah, you're right. You're right on that. Looking at another hotspot for a moment. My apologies to the people listening on the podcast. If you can't see the live video stream or the video on demand, but here's a nod to Ashterothi, who is wearing a Fed Up shirt. Very slick, sir. We'll mention that Fed Up made it all the way to their new home in Amencia. They seem, it was a rough journey, but they got set up and have reset their old standings from Cloud Ring Fountain days. And then, sure enough, you notice there's this action just across the border and not very far away in. Oh crap! I walked away from it. But skill yourself here. I'll post the link in, and you can paste in Deterid.
I keep thinking Detroit when I see that.
It does look like Detroit. I had never thought of that. But they've been setting up structures this morning and recently. In fact, there's a live stream that has them. You can see them undocked and hanging out. They're in UDW, and I'm wondering, what are they doing down there? They don't seem to be fighting fraternity. They're on the same side. What would draw them to that area? And I'm just guessing that it's the stuff on the other side of the Amencia border that attracts them. Does anyone know anything about what Skill U's doing?
I don't, but we do know that Test has a truce with Fraternity or the Winter Coalition that is ending relatively soon. So maybe it's in preparation for something to happen.
Maybe.
But no, I don't know.
Keep your eyes on this. Might be a hotspot later.
Yeah. But yeah, so we'll explore that more next time when we get together and look at the nullsec map and see what's going on. A couple things I want to say about the program. One is that we are putting up a new page on talkinginstations.com. You should visit it if you haven't visited yet. And it will be Eve Meets. And so we'll feature the world tour that Eve is going on, from Toronto to Eve Vegas to London and Berlin, all over the world. And so you can check out what the dates are there. We'll have it all grouped up in information, but also major player meets that aren't specifically CCP backed. And one of those is a Midwest retreat that Keskora does. And you can check out the information there. It's a beautiful retreat and it's a nice place to kind of get away from it all. I think they had something like this in, I think it was, I want to say Massachusetts or somewhere out there. That was, what was that one called? The East meetup or something. But you were camping in the mud, and that looked pretty miserable.
Yeah, that was Eve Northeast.
Northeast, okay. I don't know if you're camping in the mud, but I heard that it rained and you're basically in tents and they have a lodge and that sort of thing. But this is different. This is like an actual retreat where you have cabins and stuff like that. So, and that's over in Missouri area. So if you're in that area, I would totally think about going there. I'm considering it, but we'll see how it goes. I'm probably going to make Toronto.
Alaska cruise in there too.
Yes, and
they'll put some more stuff in. You can add your own events at the bottom of the page. Also, you are welcome, viewers.
Also, if you're in the Pacific Northwest, there is actually a pretty good meetup group that's starting to formulate around Seattle. But also on the 23rd of February, there will be a meetup in Portland, Oregon. So if you're interested, if you're in the Pacific Northwest,
that's a good city.
I guess get a hold of me and I'll get you involved with the Eve Seattle meetup group.
There's a rat on your shoulder. Don't move. Okay. He's supposed to be. He rises from Portland, so who knows? But we do have for the big meetings, little one but bigger one.
You're a robot.
Oh. All right. Am I still a robot?
Nope.
All right. Well, listen, I want to thank JoeBane for showing up. He's a streamer. You can catch him on what channel, Joe?
That's twitch.tv/JoeBane.
And we also want to thank NoizyGamer. And you can see and read what he researches, which is amazingly in-depth on certain topics. NoizyGamer blog, right?
Yep.
I didn't hear anything but a breath, so I'm.
Oh yes.
Said, yeah.
I
also want to stress that Noisy is one of the few people that have been in this game doing this stuff and making blogs and pointing out this stuff longer than I have. So it's a really good blog to check out.
there are a few bloggers left. He's one of them. I think the Ancient Gaming Noob is another. Anyway, so check out NoizyGamer. And also want to thank Elise for jumping in late. Thanks, Elise.
Yeah, sorry, it was a bit fashionably tardy, but it was very nice. I was listening to it on my way back home, so it was nice to hear.
Nice.
Man, you're always welcome. Of course, we love having you on because you're just so diverse in what you can talk about with new information, which is what we're all about. So thanks for coming, even late.
Yeah, and I do have, just to interrupt, I do have a fun project that you guys should be checking out. Hopefully it'll be done this week. It's just like a series of battle reports over smaller fights that you guys may not see on Reddit or any of the Eve media sites, but are really fascinating and entertaining nonetheless. I just need to come up with a great title for it, and then it'll be good to go.
Oh, excellent. Sounds exciting. Carneros and Ashterothi, thank you guys for coming.
Our pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
So, all right, this wraps up our show for today. Please check out talkinginstations.com. Don't forget to support us. That's what makes all this possible. And you can support us on Patreon, or there are other ways. You can subscribe to this channel now as we try to cultivate Twitch and see how it works. So make sure that you follow now if you're still here watching this channel, or subscribe to the channel. That's even better. That helps out a lot. Or go to Patreon. Any which way you do it, support Talking in Stations so you get more content coming from us all the time. Okay, thanks everyone for showing up today in chat. That is all we have time for this week. We'll see you next week on Talking in Stations.